Hey everybody, welcome to our review video for test number 3. If you remember correctly, test number 3 is only on one unit. It's a large unit. It's unit 7. We're going to go through the unit as usual and everything in the unit you need to know for the test. Please don't forget to look at the review sheet because there's also the terms and concepts that we're not going to go through here, but they are found on the review sheet as well. At least the test overview, I should say, and look for some other things there that might be on this test. Okay, so our Gemara is on Daf Chavav Amud Bet in Masechet Bava Kama. It actually is before the sugya that we did early in the year. This one's a little more complex, so I left it till later on. The Gemara begins here where it says Amar Rabba, and it goes all the way down till where it says Pluti Rabba Shimon Goli of Rabbanan. The reason we put such a large sugya together, because even though it's like 3 mini units, but it's all the same pattern. And since it's all the same pattern, I felt comfortable putting it all together. So the important thing is to recognize this pattern and realize what this Gemara is about. And once you realize what this Gemara is about, or the pattern in the Gemara, it makes everything a lot easier. So let's go through that first. So the Gemara begins, Amar Rabba. Rabba says, and we don't see that again, so I left that unhighlighted. And then what Rabba does is he goes through 3 different scenarios. These scenarios are ways in which somebody could do something. And then the question is, in different halachot, where you'd be chayav. If I do an action that you'd be chayav for in each of these areas of halachot. So nezikin is damaging someone's property. Arba divarim. The 4 things you pay for if you injure somebody. Galut, going to exile for your miklah because I killed someone by accident. Malacha on Shabbat, doing things on Shabbat that I'm not allowed to do. Eved, the fact that a person is obligated to let their servant go free if they injure their servant. When it comes to all those halachot, the question here really is, if I do the act that I normally be chayav for, but I do it in a different way, each of these scenarios is a different way of doing it, what is the ruling? Am I chayav? Am I patur? Is it a piluta machloket? It's something else we got a little confusing at the end here. But at the end of the day, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at different halachot, okay, that's in the blue. And if I do the act that would normally make me chayav, the question is, but I do it in this kind of way. Okay, that's the scenario. What's the ruling? Am I chayav or am I patur? So before we get into the Gemara, let's just take a look at these 5 halachot, these 5 areas of halacha, and talk about, if I was chayav, what would I have to be chayav for? What would I do? So if it was nezikin, we're talking about if I do damage, so I'd have to pay money. Dal devarim, I'd also have to pay money for the injury that I inflicted on someone, and the 4 things I pay for: embarrassment, pain, loss of work, and medical bills. Shabbat, if I violate Shabbat, if I do an act that violates Shabbat, normally if I'm chayav, I'd have to be chayav to bring a korban. If I killed someone by accident and I'm chayav, what would that mean? I'm chayav. I would have to go to escape to your miklat. And when I say chayav, when it comes to an ebed, I would have to let that servant go free. Again, we're going to see there's a machloket in that case. So again, in these 5 areas, if I do the act that normally would make me chayav, one of these 5 things, right? The question is, what if I do it in a different way? I do the act, but done a little bit differently. Am I still chayav to do or pay these things? So now what we'll do is we'll read quickly through this Gemara with the highlighted page so we see what we're doing each step, and then we will move on to just reviewing it in a more of a chart form. Okay, so the Gemara begins. Amar Rab, Rabba says, okay, this is the first way in which you could do something. If someone had a rock on their lap, velohi kirban, they didn't know it was there, ve'amad, and they got up, v'naflan, and it fell off. Again, this is, excuse me, we're not really concerned with what happened if someone has a rock on their lap and they didn't know and they got up and it rolls off. This is just an example of how something can happen. This is what we called ones. Okay, this is ones, which means if something happens against your will. So that's case number 1. So what happens if I do something ones, where it's against my will, but the act that I do is still an act that would make me chayav. So, but if it was against my will, if it was out of my control, so to speak, and nothing I could have done about it, like in this case where the rock was on your lap and you didn't know and it fell off, so would I be chayav or not? So the Gemara says, Le'inyan nizakin chayav. For damage, you do still be chayav. So if I damage something, even though I did it, it was out of my control, it was against my will, out of my control, whatever it is, I'm still chayav. Le'inyan arba devarim. What if I injure someone in that way? Do I pay the arba devarim? Patur. No, you don't have to pay the dalin devarim if you injured somebody, but it was ba'ones. Linyan Shabbat, let's say it was Shabbos. Let's say I did a malacha, something I'm not allowed to do on Shabbat, but I did it in a way that was against my will. So Gemara says, Melechet machshevet asra Torah. the Torah only prohibited doing what's called a malachet machshevet, which means doing a malach in a normal, productive way. Since this was not, right, if you're doing it ba'ones, if it's against your will, out of your control, so you wouldn't call that the normal way you do something, and therefore, linyan Shabbat, if I do malacha, it's on Shabbat, but I do it, but the act itself is out of my control, it just was caused by me, I would be patur, even though it doesn't say it. L'inyan galut, regarding exile patur, you would not have to go to exile, because even though I killed somebody by accident, which normally makes you go to exile, since it was out of your control, the ruling is that you'd be patur. L'inyan eved, let's say I injured my eved that way, pilukta de rashbag v'rabbanan. It's machloket between Rabban Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanan, whether the eved would go free or whether the eved would not go free. How do I know that? The Tanya, as it says in a Braita. So now, how do I know that the Rashbag and the Rabbanan would argue in this case? This says in the Braita, if it happened that the Eved's master was a doctor, va'amarlo, and he said to his master, Kachol einai, please treat my eye, v'sima, but he blinds him. Chator li shinai, please drill my teeth, v'hipila, but he knocks it out by accident. What happens in that case? The Rabbanan say, Shichek ba'adon, he can laugh at his master, v'yatzal achirut, and go free, even though it wasn't intentional. Rashbag, or Rosh Gamliel says no. V'shichta, the Torah has the extra word and damages it, which means we'll just explore that a little bit later. Ad shit kavein l'shachta, which means the Eved only goes free shit kavein l'shachta if there was intent to damage his eye in this case or any other part of his body. So Rosh Gamliel says that since there was no kavanah, no intent in our case. In the case here in the Braita of the doctor he's trying to treat the Eved, therefore he would not get to go free. So what was this Braita bought again? Ditanya, as it says in the Braita. How do I know how I know that if you injure your Eved in this way, ba'ones, right? You injure your Eved, but it was against your will, that it would be a machloke. Well, there's a Braita where there's a similar machloke, and that would apply to our case as well. Okay, now that we've got the basic framework and we've translated one, I'm going to go through the next two a little more quickly. What happens if he hirbav shachav v'nafla? What if the person knew that it was there, was shachav, but he forgot v'amav v'nafla? Okay, so that's what's called shogeg. So what happens if I do an action, but I do that action in a way which is called shogeg? It's a mistake. I made a mistake. It was there. I knew about it. It wasn't against my will or out of my control, but I just forgot. So what's the ruling then? What if I do one of these 5 acts, but it was shogeg? Linyan zakin chayav, for damage you still chayav to pay. Linyan dal devermin, for the other 4 things patur, you would not have to pay. Linyan galut, let's say, what about exile? Would I have to go to exile if I injured somebody in this way? Chayav, yes, you would have to go to exile. Why? How do I know that? Amar cries, it says in the pasuk, bishgaga. You go to Ir Miklat. It's someone who kills bishgaga goes to Ir Miklat. What does that mean, bishgaga? Mechlal, that implies the havile yediyah. You go. There has to have been some sort of knowledge. It can't be a completely out of your control situation where you kill somebody but it has nothing to do with anything that you could have done to prevent it. No, there has to be some sort of knowledge. In this case, meaning there's knowledge, so therefore you would be chayav to go to galut because there's some sort of knowledge, just like as mentioned in the pasuk. L'inyan Shabbat patur, for Shabbos again you would be patur. You would not be chayav to bring a korban if you did an act you were not allowed to do on Shabbat, but it was in this kind of way where I forgot the situation. Linyan Eved, again, when it comes to Eved, Piluted Rashbag Rabbanan, again it would be Machloket Rabbi Shimon Gamliel the Rabbanan, because again they argue in a case where it was not intentional. Here there's clearly not intentional. Finally, we have the last scenario. But let's say I wanted to throw a rock 2 amot, but instead it went 4 amot. This is what we pointed out. It's what we called intentional. Okay, I'm going to abbreviate intentional act, unintended result. That's really sloppy, but it's late at night, so I'm just going to let it go. An intentional act and unintentional result, meaning in this case I was planning to do the act that I did, which was throwing it, but I wasn't planning on it going 2 amot. I wasn't planning on going 4 amot, which is what it did. I was planning on it going 2. So the act that I did, I was intending to do, but the result that happened was not an act I was intending. Not a result I was intending on. As opposed to in the first 2 cases, I wasn't planning on doing the act. It was because of a mistake. Here I knew exactly what I was doing. It was just a result that surprised me. So what happens if I do one of these 5 things? I do the act that would make you chayav, but the act that I did, I wasn't intending it to result in something that would make me chayav. So what's the ruling? Again, this kaven l'zark shtayim zark arba. You wanted to throw a rock 2 amot, but it went 4. Li'inyan zakin chayav for damages. You're still chayav. Li'inyan dal devrim. Let's say it's for you injure someone, but I wasn't intending to injure someone, but I knew that I was doing an act that could have. Patur. You would be patur. Should underline that. Yeah. You'd be patur. Because we'll talk about that, why that is later. Linyan Shabbat, regarding Shabbat, Melechet Machsheva, but you need Melechet Machsheva. You do need to do Malacha in a normal, productive way. And this act was not done in a normal, productive way because it's not normal to do an act where I wasn't intending on the result that happened. Linyan Galut, what about Galut, exile? Asher lo Seida Amar Rachman, the Torah says. The Torah says, Asher lo Seida. You go to Ir Miklat because you didn't plan. If you did not plan, you killed someone, but there was no planning. Prat, this excludes someone who wanted to throw 2 amot, but it went 4. We'll talk about what that means. It excludes from what? Linyan Eved, again, when it comes to Eved, Pluti Rashbag Rabbanan. Again, it's a machlok Rashbag Rabbanan, because again, in this case, the result of injuring your Eved was not intentional, and they argue whenever that result was not intentional. The Rabbanan would say he goes free. The Rashbag says no, it has to be intentional damage to go free. So now we've read through all three ways in which something can happen. We applied those ways of happening to 5 of the areas of halacha. We saw the rulings. Let's go over it quickly in this chart. So if you take a look at this chart, it's also available on Haiku. So these scenarios are different. We'll call these are ways in which you can do something. Okay, they're ways in which you could have done it. So let's say again you did the act which you would be chayav for, but you did it in a little bit of a different way. So if the way that you did it was where the rock was on your lap, but you didn't know, meaning it's complete onus. Okay, so what happens if I act in that way? So again, here are the 5 areas of halacha. If I damage someone that way, I'd still be chayav. If I injure someone, I'd still be patur if they are bar devarim. If I did something you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, but I did the act completely ba'onus, right, it was out of my control, I'd be patur. I wouldn't have to bring a korban. If I killed someone, I would not have to go to Ir Miklat. And if I injured my eved, it's a machloket whether I have to let him go free. Okay, now what if the rock was on my lap, but I forgot the rock was on my lap, and then I got up and it rolled off, whatever it is, right? Meaning, what happens in a situation of shogeg, where it was in my control, but I made a mistake, and at the time I didn't realize what I was doing. So what's the halacha then? So if I injure someone in that way, I'd be chayav. If I break something of someone's, then I'd be chayav to pay. If I injure someone, I would be patur from the dal devarim. If I violate Shabbat in that way, where I forgot that it's Shabbos, so I forgot what I was doing, I made some kind of mistake, even though it was in my control, but I made a mistake, then you're patur. It's not malachet machshevet. Galut, you be chayav. That's a classic case where you go to Ir Miklat, where it was in my control to not kill the person, but I made a mistake and it caused them to die. And regarding an Eved, again, it's going to be machloket just like in all other cases. Finally, if you had a situation, again, which was an unintended act, and again, this is the way in which you did it, right? You did an act which would normally make you chayav, but you did that act in a way which was not standard. Oops, I'm sorry about that. Okay. So the question is, what's the ruling in this situation? Okay, unintended act, unintended results. I did the act, but I wasn't expecting the result to happen. So if I injure someone in that way, meaning I do an act that I know can injure someone, but I wasn't intending on it to injure them, chayav, you have to pay for it. I'm sorry about that. If you break something that belongs to someone, I do the act that I know could break something. I throw a baseball at the window, but I was expecting the baseball to bounce off, and it breaks it instead. Chayav, I pay for damages. Dal devarim, let's say I injure someone in that way, right? Again, the same idea. I throw a baseball and I'm planning on it landing in front of the person, but it slips out of my hand or whatever it is, and it goes a little farther, hits them in the face, breaks their nose. Patur, I still don't have to pay for those dal devarim. I only pay for the actual damage to the person's face. Linyan Shabbat, what happens if I violate Shabbos in that way? Then I would be patur, right? I do an act that I think, right? I want to throw a baseball 2 amot, right? It's asur deoraita to transport an object 4 amot in Reshut Harabim. That's the distance. But I say, okay, I'll throw the ball 2 amot, not 4, and it slips and it goes farther. So the act of violating Shabbat was there, right? It went 4 amot, but I wasn't intending on it, and then I'd be patur. When it comes to galut, let's say I killed someone in that way, it's a machloket, but the machloket here is going to be in Rashi, so we're going to have to look at it because the Gemara is unclear. Linyan Eved, let's say I injured my Eved in that way, again it's machloket, Rashbag, and the Rabbanan, because the result of injuring my Eved was not intended. So the Rashbag says he does not go free, and the Rabbanan says no, you go free no matter what. Now we have to get on to what we call the klalim, the general rules. What are these klalim? Well, what we've read so far was the ruling in each of these scenarios if you act in a certain way. The question is why? Right? Why are these? Why is this a psak? Why is this the ruling? Why are you chayav for damages in all these cases? Why are you patur for Shabbat in all these cases? Why in one are you chayiv for galut or patur from galut? Why is that? Why are you patur from the dal devrim? So there's a klal, there's a general rule when it comes to each of these areas of halacha, and the general rule for each of these areas of halacha will decide what the ruling is going to be in a specific case. So let's see those rulings. First, we have when it comes to nezikin. When it comes to nezikin, the ruling is a person is always responsible for damage, adam muad olam. Because of that rule, in all these cases, even though you didn't know about it, it was out of your control, you forgot, it's irrelevant. You're responsible for the damage that you do, you're responsible for the damage that you do, period. The dal devarim. Why in all these cases where you patur for the dal devarim? Well, look at the klal. You only pay the dal devarim if you do it on purpose or if you do it by negligence, pshia. All the three cases that we saw, the person acting was not planning on doing it on purpose. They weren't even negligent. Even in the case where the person wanted to throw a rock 2 amot and it went 4 amot, they were acting in a way where they easily could have made something go 2 amot. It just didn't happen the way it normally does. That's not negligent. It was an honest mistake. It happened. It went farther than they expected. So because you only pay in these situations, that's my klal. So in our cases, the Gemara, which don't fit this klal, they're not on purpose or negligent, you wouldn't have to pay. Why on Shabbat are you patur in all the cases? Well, we talked about melech and machshevet. It's only asur d'oraita. You only have to give a korban if you do the act that you're not allowed to do in a normal, productive manner. All these cases were not the normal way, and therefore you're patur. Galut, you only have to have some. You only go to your miklat if you have some awareness, but you made a mistake, right? So I know what's going on in the situation. Is I made a mistake. I wasn't careful with the handle of my axe. I didn't check to make sure it was tightened. I should have. I didn't. So it goes flying. Right? It goes flying. I'm chopping wood and whatever. It's a good case in the Gemara. I'm driving my car. We talked about this in class. My car has bad brakes, but I forget about it. So I get in the car and I start driving, and the brakes go, and God forbid I drive off the road and I kill somebody. So in a case like that, that's when you go to your miklat. You have some awareness, but you made a mistake. I just forgot about the brakes. So in our Gemara, we had one case where it was totally out of your control. There was no awareness, therefore you'd be patur. We had a second case which was an exact case of shogeg, that's why you're chayav. And the third case we're going to discuss afterwards. Finally, Eved, well, the klaf of the Rabbanan is that you always let your Eved go free no matter when you injure him, and that's why in all these cases, even though they were unintentional, you still go free. The Rash Bag, Rav Shimon Gamliel says, no, only if you intended to injure your Eved. And that's why in all these three cases, Rash Bag would say, you're chayav. That's why they argue, because in all these three cases, you did not intend to injure your Eved, and therefore your Eved should not have to be able to go free. So again, based on the rules for each of these areas of halacha, we can understand why we gave the ruling in all our cases. The last thing we have to go through are the drashot. Okay, these are all drashot. We'll just write the word drasha. These are all drasha or drashot. What is a drasha? A drasha, as we pointed out many times, is where someone looks at the words of the Torah, and based on the way the words of the Torah psukim are worded, it teaches us something new. In each of our three scenarios, there was one drasha that was brought. So I'm going to go through all three. The first one, do it quickly. Try. The first one where there's a machlok Rav Shbag and the Rabbanan, when it came to do you free an Eved or not, and the Gemara said, how do I know that? The Gemara quoted a Braita, and in the Braita, Rabban Shimon Gamliel quoted a pasuk. The word from the pasuk is vishachta. It's one word that's quoted in the Gemara, and he damages it. It comes from the pasuk, which tells us when an eved goes free. If a man will strike his servant or maid's eye, vishichta, and damages it, then he must set them free. So Rashbag says, what do you mean? Well, hang on a second. If he strikes his servant's eye, that already assumes that you're damaging it. So why add and damages it? So Rashbag says that this extra word, you can make a drasha on this word and say it's trying to teach us that it must be with intent to damage. And that's where Rashbag gets his opinion from. That's the drasha in this case. In our second scenario, the Gemara quoted a pasuk about your miklat and said, when does someone go to your miklat? If you kill someone bishkaga, bishogeg. So the Gemara said, look at this word bishogeg. The word bishogeg means that you have awareness, you know what's going on, but you just make a mistake. So in that kind of case, that's when you go to your miklat. So the Gemara said, that's what it's saying, bishkaga, shogeg, a temporary mistake. That's when you go to your miklat. So too in our case, you would go to miklat as well, because our scenario is exactly the same. So that was the drush in the second case. The word bishkaga, which means a temporary mistake, teaches us that only in all cases where there's a temporary mistake, where you know what's going on, but you just made a mistake, that's when you go to your miklat. Finally, that we had the last case also had a pasuk when it comes to your miklat. It says you go to your miklat v'asher lo tzeidah, if you killed someone without planning. Okay, what does without planning mean? So that means that there's something that you were not intending to do, and because it wasn't complete intention, you don't have to go to your miklat. So the Gemara says, based on this pasuk, the Torah specifically saying without planning. That teaches us that someone who wants to throw a rock 2 amot and it goes 4 amot, right? Someone who does not intend to kill but intends to do the act that kills, that person is excluded. Now, based on this pasuk, asher lo tzeda. Right, again, you have to kill without planning, and in our situation where you intended the act but you did not intend the result, that excludes you. So, what does it mean to exclude you? What is this drasha excluding? So, we saw in Rashi two possibilities. Right, again, it says if a person killed without planning, it was a drasha based on that phrase. So the Gemara says this excludes someone in this kavin lazark shtayim v'zarak arba. Now, why is that? I'm sorry, what could that possibly mean? So the Gemara doesn't explain, it's unclear. So Rashi has two possibilities. Why would there be two possibilities, right? So did you plan in this case or did you not? Well, we said it's interesting. In our case, in this Kavin Lazark Shtayim V'Zark Arba, you planned the action, but you didn't plan the result. So if you go to your miklat for not planning, well, what does that mean? Not planning what? Because in this case, you have one thing that was planned, one thing that wasn't planned. So which one is it? So the first opinion in Rashi is that you cannot go to your miklat, your patur. Why? Because you planned the action. Okay, since you planned to do the act, you planned on throwing the rock at the person. Okay, you weren't planning on killing them, but you were planning on throwing the rock. That's called planning, and therefore, since you go to your miklat for not planning, and you did plan in this case, you are excluded. What are you excluded from the Gemara? You're excluded from the protection. That's how Rashi that's the first interpretation of the Gemara quoted by Rashi. The second interpretation is no. This actually is telling us that you can go to your miklat. You're chayav to go to your miklat. What does that mean? Because look here. You did not plan the result, right? So the Gemara says, look, without planning means you didn't plan for the person to die. In our case, you didn't plan for the person to die. So the Gemara says, this pasuk excludes someone who in Miskavin Lazark Shtayim V'Zark. What are they excluded from? We don't call them someone who plans. We don't call them a planner. And since you're not considered to be called a planner because you didn't plan the person to die, therefore you'd be allowed to go to your miklat because, again, you'd be called someone who did not plan. Two different opinions in Rashi about how to read this drasha in the Gemara. So now I'm just going to read one more time from the top quickly. Rabba said, if a person had a rock on their lap, they didn't know about it, they get up and it fell off. Again, a case of ones. So what happens if I do any of these acts that would make me chayav, but it was against my will? If regarding damages, I'd be chayav. Regarding arba, the four things you pay for if you injure someone, patur, you would not have to pay. You'd be patur. Linyan Shabbat, when it comes to Shabbos, melech and machshevet. The Torah only prohibited melech and machshevet, and this is not melech and machshevet, so you'd be patur. Linyan galut, regarding galut, exile to your miklat patur, you would not have to go because it was totally out of your control. Linyan eved, when it comes to an eved, if you injure your eved, pilut to the Rashbag Rabbanan, it's machlok between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. The Tanya, how do I know that? As it says in a Braita, Harei shahaya rabbo rofei, if the master of the servant was a doctor, va'amarlo, and the eved said to his master, kachol einai, please treat my eye v'sima, but he accidentally blinds him. Chator li shnai, drill my tooth, v'hipilam, but the master accidentally knocks the tooth out. What happens? The Rabbanan say, Shichek Badoni, he laughs at his master, he can go free. Rashba Agomer, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, no, V'shachta. The Torah specifically says, and damages it with an extra word. What does that teach us? Ad shit kavin l'shachta. There had to have been intent to damage, and in this case, there was no intent to damage. So based on this Braita, we know the Rashba and the Rabbanan would also argue in this case. That's situation one. Situation number two, he knew about it. The rock, he forgot about ma benafla. So this is shogeg. This is a mistake. Linyan izakin chayav, for damage you be chayav to pay. Linyan dal vrim, for injuring someone you would not pay for the four things. Linyan galut chayav, you would have to pay. You would have to go to your miklat. Why? How do I know that? The Amar Kra, because the pasuk says bishkaga, you go if you make a shogeg. What does that mean? Mechlal, which implies the havi le'ediyah. There's some sort of knowledge. It's not out of your control. You know a little bit about what's going on. You're aware. You just made a mistake. The ha and this, meaning in our case, havi le'ediyah, there was. So it matches a perfect case where you go to your miklat. Linyan Shabbat patur, you'd be patur for Shabbos, because again, it's not malach and mashevet, because again, you made a mistake. You were aware of what you were doing, but you weren't expecting to do what you did because it was based on a mistake. You weren't expecting it to be to be chayav, so you're patur. Linyan Evid, regarding Evid, plut to the Rashbag Ron, to machloke. Kavin Zark Shtayim V'Zark. What if I did something where I wanted to throw a rock 2 amot and went 4 amot? That's an example of someone who intends the action but doesn't intend the result. So everything you do is what you expected to do, except the result is not what you expected. Linyan is akin chayav. If you damage in that way, you're chayav. Linyan del v'rim patur, for the four things you pay for when it comes to injuring someone, you're patur. Linyan galut, for galut asher lo tzedar rachman. The Torah says you go to your miklat asher lo tzedar if you did not plan. Prat, that excludes linit kavim l'zark shtayim v'zark gaber. That excludes someone who wanted to throw 2 amot and went 4 amot, meaning excludes someone who did the act of killing intentionally but wasn't planning on the person dying. So what does that mean they're excluded? So we saw two opinions in Rashi. One opinion is that you're excluded from being allowed to go to your miklat because if the Torah says Asher lo tzedai, you didn't plan, but in this case you did plan the act which killed, even though you weren't planning on killing. The other opinion in Rashi is no, prat, it excludes you from being called a murderer because at the end of the day you didn't plan on killing, and therefore you get to go to your miklat. Okay. Finally, linyan, I lost the place. Linyan Eved Pluto Rashbag V'Rabanan. Okay, this is actually the last case that we discussed. This last case here in Kavein, the Zark Arbiv Zark Shmon, we didn't get to, we're not gonna do in class, so the test is from here till here. Good luck. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and we'll see you guys on Monday.